Welcome to Mr. Bogema's TNReady U.S. History Must-Knows. Gilded Age Politics, Economics, Standard 4. So, what were the problems in the 1880s and 1890s? This was a time period known as the Gilded Age. It was a term coined by Mark Twain, the famous American novelist and satirist. And he was talking about how in the late 19th century, in the 1870s, 80s, and 90s, America was growing at an unprecedented rate. Factories were being constructed, cities were being built. Everything was looking pretty good for the United States. We exited the Civil War. Reconstruction was coming to an end. But underneath all this gilded gold of the time period was kind of some rottenness, and there were some serious issues involving corruption in the United States during this time period. So we're going to start by talking about railroads. Railroads were an incredibly important part of the United States. They transported raw materials, people. They connected people across vast pieces of land. It helped connect the East with the West with the Transcontinental Railroad. It helped move people to settle the Western territories, and they were essential for the economy of the United States. But the United States government knew this and kind of had given out a lot of public land to these railroad companies and kind of aided in their growth and development. And a lot of these companies become really powerful, and they want to keep getting favors from Congress. So we have some scandals, and the scandal that is discussed in this standard is the Credit Mobilier scandal, which was a railroad company which was paying off members of Congress to receive favoritism from them in terms of contracts and land. So in 1881, as a response, the United States passes the Interstate Commerce Act, which kind of regulated a lot of what railroads were doing in terms of shipping goods across state lines. Okay, the next topic we're going to talk about is city and urban politics. Most cities in the Northeast and the Midwest were dominated by political machines that controlled the politics of cities. They used favoritism and privileges to gain votes, and they used a lot of new immigrants who were streaming into the country as a large voting base. And the individuals who ran these political machines were known as party bosses. And the most famous party boss is Boss Tweed, who was the New York City party boss, and he used his power as a commissioner of various things like the Public Works Department to kind of commit fraud. He was overpaying for projects and pocketing a whole bunch of money, and he ended up stealing millions of dollars from New York City. And he's going to be exposed by Thomas Nast, a very famous German-born political cartoonist who's going to illustrate Boss Tweed's corruption. And Boss Tweed, of course, his voting base. He was concerned about these illustrations because a lot of the voters that supported Tweed couldn't read, but they could see these illustrations of Thomas Nast, kind of depicting him as this overfed monster of New York City, consuming power and money and abusing his positions, which will lead to his arrest and imprisonment. He'll get imprisoned in a jail that he actually built, where he'll die, and that's because of Thomas Nast. So they're forever connected in history together, Nast and Tweed. And our final topic will be the spoils system. So the spoils system was very prevalent during the Gilded Age. It was a way for politicians to reward those that supported them with various jobs and positions in government that kind of gave them support and more power. And it was a very common way to kind of appease people that were supporting you. But President Garfield didn't like the spoils system, and this deranged man named Charles Guiteau felt that he was owed a job by James Garfield, and James Garfield didn't know this individual, but during this time period, you could walk up to the White House and speak with the president. And on several occasions, Charles Guiteau would go up to the White House to try to talk to Garfield to try to get a job in the government, and Garfield turned him down, and Guiteau ends up shooting James Garfield in the back on a rail platform, and doesn't kill him immediately. It takes him all summer for President Garfield to die. He died from infections from the wounds, because American doctors during this time period didn't believe in that germs caused illness and infection, and Garfield ended up dying. He also had very terrible doctors who wouldn't really allow alternate views to try to help him. So Garfield dies, and Chester A. Arthur becomes president. He was Garfield's vice president, and he's going to pass the Pendleton Act in 1883, which effectively forces a lot of people applying for government jobs to take exams to show that they are capable of working in various government positions. So it creates a merit-based system rather than a spoils-based system for government employment. Let's look at our test questions. Reasons for economic problems of the Gilded Age: rapid growth of trusts and monopolies, ruthless business tactics and unfair practices by the railroads. So the railroads were kind of considered a lot of common Americans, farmers and workers, felt railroads were kind of the enemy of the people. They were too powerful. So how does the government respond to these problems? Well, they pass the Interstate Commerce Act. So that's interstate commerce, so trade across state lines. A lot of that was done on railroads, by railroads. All right, which groups had gained power by helping new immigrants in the United States during the late 1800s? And those were those political machines that, promised and gave immigrants better living conditions for their votes, fixed the roads and their neighborhoods, provided them with employment in order to gain their votes, their loyalty. So that's political machines. And here we have Boss Tweed standing by a ballot box. So ballot box is where you vote. So voting is how you gain power within a democracy. So which concern is expressed in this Thomas Nast cartoon? So Thomas Nast, remember, he was the cartoonist who was, drawing these pictures, showing the abuses of Boss Tweed. And remember, Boss Tweed was part of the New York City political machine, and he's standing by a ballot box where you go for an election. So political machines manipulated elections to maintain power. And lastly, this legislation affected how federal employees were hired. This law now required government jobs to be what? So we have the Pendleton Act, that's a vocab term. Remember, the Pendleton Act required an exam to gain a job within the government. So it created a merit-based system using civil service examinations.